Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Yes, indeed. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. I'm Carol Masser, along with June Grosso and Kevin Cirilli. We're going to continue our conversation about election 2020 as we continue to watch the counting that's going on in many states still around the country as it pertains to the election outcome. First up, though, let's get back to your top business stories and another check on that trading day. Here is Charlie Pellet.
Thank you very much, Carol Masser. 28 minutes to go ahead of the close. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ closed to session highs. Fed Chair Jay Powell is stressing that the economy needs more fiscal and monetary policy support. He's also warning that mounting coronavirus infection rates are a risk.
Since the beginning of the pandemic, we have taken forceful actions to provide relief and stability, to ensure that the recovery will be as strong as possible, and to limit lasting damage to the economy. Today, my colleagues on the Federal Open Market Committee and I reaffirmed our commitment to support the economy in this challenging time.
AstraZeneca's third-quarter profit fell short of analyst estimates as the pandemic inflated costs and discouraged some doctor visits and diagnoses. As coronavirus cases continue to surge in the United States, there are questions about what shift in strategy we might see in a potential Biden administration. Dr. Jason Farley is a nursing professor at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
I think the mixed messaging from the Trump administration has sowed confusion and it sowed doubt about the importance of the epidemic, and I think that's one of the most important things that the Biden administration would change.
The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. After earnings, Qualcomm shares soaring after reporting fourth-quarter results that beat expectations. Qualcomm shares up right now by 12.5%. It is an up day on Wall Street. S&P up 73, higher by 2.1%. The Dow up now by 555 points. That is a gain of 2%. NASDAQ up 304, up 2.6%. 10-year down 3/32, 10-year yield 0.77%. Gold up 2.5%. 19.49 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude down 1.6%. 38.53 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. And as I said, we're still, of course, watching the counting of votes in a handful of key states when it comes to the election outcome. Well, this election, once again, we saw a Democratic presidential candidate collecting more popular votes than his Republican opponent. We know it's not over yet. We're, of course, contingent and watching what happens when it comes to the Electoral College. But when it comes to the popular vote, it kind of begs a question. Why can't Republicans win that popular vote? Writing about it is Bloomberg opinion columnist Jonathan Bernstein. He kind of asked that question in his latest column. He covers and writes about politics and policy. He's taught about it at the University of Texas in San Antonio. He joins us on the phone from San Antonio, Texas. Jonathan, good to have you here with Kevin and June and myself. First of all, give us some history when it comes to the popular vote and Republicans.
Well, Democrats have now won the popular vote. I suspect you're going to hear a lot of this from Democrats in the next several weeks. From 1992 up through this year, Democrats have won the popular vote in all but one time, 7 out of 8, which is the best streak any party's ever had in U.S. history. So it's pretty impressive just on the raw numbers itself. When you look at it more carefully, one of the things I said in the column is, it sort of breaks down a little bit. There weren't a lot of runaway wins as there were for, say, Republicans during the Reagan-Bush era, Nixon-Reagan era. Had Democrats taken the presidency, say, in 2000 when Al Gore won a very, very narrow popular vote margin, they might well have lost it, say, in 2008, and you might have had a couple big Republican wins. So one thing I'm saying is it may not be all that it really seems.
So, Jonathan, are you saying that, what's your opinion about whether the presidential vote, because of the electoral vote, it doesn't match the popular vote, and whether there should be changes in the system so that the popular vote does mirror who the president is?
Well, it's a great question because, traditionally in the United States history, there hasn't been this split that we saw in 2016 when Trump got elected. Usually the winner of the Electoral College is the winner of the popular vote. It's only happened a handful of times. However, two of those were fairly recent, in 2000 and 2016. Even then, though, in 2000, it was basically a tie both ways, so there wasn't that much of a thing there. It looks like this time the Electoral College is probably going to wind up on the same side as the popular vote. So, it makes a lot of people make a big fuss about it. There's a good case to be made that we shouldn't have the Electoral College, but most of the time it doesn't actually make that big a difference.
So in terms of where things go, though, and I just want to catch everybody up to speed because we do have some new developments. According to CBS News, CBS is reporting that Jared Kushner is looking for there to be some type of spokesperson for the president's legal team, akin to James Baker, that they're looking for. And we should also note, and I think this is really important, folks, to keep in mind as we have these conversations about the legal cases, as we also have these cases, have the conversation about the Electoral College, is that in essence, one of the president's entire strategy right now is dependent upon whether or not this thing comes down to one or two states. Right now, there's a handful of states where the votes haven't been counted, whether it's Arizona and Maricopa County, which has been trending left, and some networks have called for the Democrats. If it's out in Arizona, it's coming down to Clark County. But you've also got North Carolina, Georgia, Pennsylvania. And if it sounds a little bit discombobulated, it's because it is. And when I talk to sources, Jonathan Bernstein on the president's reelection campaign, they're not even right now all speaking from the same talking points or from the same legal playbook because they don't know which specific lawsuit in order to come down with. So how is that muddying the waters of the president's argument, just from an analytical standpoint, not a political one, an analytical standpoint, about why there's so much confusion right now around the president's strategy? And Jonathan just got about a minute here.
That's pretty simple. There is no strength to the president's legal argument. There just isn't. The votes are proceeding normally. This is how it's supposed to work. In many cases, for example, Pennsylvania, it's working slowly because Republicans set it up to work slowly. But the truth is, at the end of the day, the president doesn't really have much of a legal case. And if the states go the way it looks like they will, he's not going to have a very practical chance, even if the courts were very generous to him.
Maybe that's why Rudy Giuliani is making the statements for the legal team instead of Baker.
Yeah, I mean, the other half of this is that the president seems to be doing his legal post-election strategy the same sort of half-assed way he does policy in the White House. So, that's what you get.
Well, sit tight for a second, Jonathan. We're going to continue this conversation because I do think it's interesting as we look at kind of the history of our election system, the Electoral College. Kevin, you pointed out back in 2000, we kind of all got an education on it. But it does make us kind of take a deeper look at it and wonder if its time has kind of passed and whether or not we need to make some changes. We're going to come back with Jonathan Bernstein. He is Bloomberg Opinion columnist, joining us on the phone from San Antonio, Texas. Right now, though, let's get another check on world and national news. For that, it's back over to Nancy Lyons in our 99.1 newsroom in the nation's capital. Hi, Nance.
Hey, Carol. Well, there is still no declared winner of the presidential election, but Joe Biden is closing the gap with President Trump in Pennsylvania, where votes are still being counted. If Biden does win there, he would be assured of a victory. His campaign manager, Jen O'Malley Dixon, is feeling pretty confident.
We believe from our data that the majority of the outstanding ballots left are for the vice president, and that at the end of the day, and let us hope it's the end of today, but at the end of the day, we will win by a sizable number of votes in Pennsylvania.
Judges in Georgia and Michigan have quickly dismissed Trump campaign lawsuits, undercutting a campaign legal strategy that was aimed at attacking the integrity of the voting process in the states where the results could put Biden in the White House. Well, apparently President Trump will not be traveling to Florida this weekend for a planned nonprofit fundraiser. Palm Beach County Sheriff Rick Bradshaw says he received that word from the Secret Service.
Until he gets the final, count on what's going on with the election, I don't think he wants to be traveling down here.
The president has not made any public appearances since his election night speech. Facebook says it has taken down a group that has surged in popularity since Election Day called Stop the Steal. The group, which had attracted more than 360,000 followers, was attempting to sow doubt about the legitimacy of the election. The Stop the Steal hashtag has also become popular on Twitter. Facebook says it removed the group because some members were calling for violence. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Nancy, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week, a special edition on this Thursday. Joining me right now, Kevin Cirilli. And, you know, Kevin, I do think about you and your coverage. I mean, you've been out there on the campaign trail, you know, watching everything happening. You know, we've talked, you know, we've been watching the polls, and then here we are this week. We knew we weren't going to necessarily have a decision at the end of Election Day, but here we are 2 days after, and the count is continuing.
Well, and I think it's going to be interesting in 4 years from now, 8 years from now, 12 years from now, and in future elections, if this is the new normal, Carol. Is this the new normal, regardless of whether or not there's a pandemic? Are people going to cast their ballots in early? And is it going to be an election month and whatnot? And to be quite frank with you, we talk about so much in economically speaking, about some of the changes, like work from home, for example, that the pandemic has brought about. Well, I actually think we could.
I'm placing an order to sell short euro at 118.155. Okay, order placed to sell. Oops. It executed. Okay, I open new position for euro against United States dollar at 118.155.
What's remarkable, right? I mean, typically you see parties kind of rally around certainly their candidate, and you're not necessarily seeing that. And you could even see on election night, I was up really late, I'm sure you were really up really late, to see the president come out and basically say he won the election, and yet many Republicans were very uncomfortable with that. And so it is really an unusual time, to say the least.
You know, and I would, the last point there is so incredibly important, because I did speak to a senior staffer, to a prominent member of Congress in the Republican Party, who was deeply uncomfortable with what the president said. But I will tell you, there were many Republicans I spoke with who were happy with it.
Yeah, it's interesting times, to say the least. All right, you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Master, Kevin Cirilli, and this is Bloomberg.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We begin with a sports headline out of Connecticut. UConn has suspended all basketball activities after a player tested positive for the coronavirus. The school made the announcement today, but did not say who contracted the virus or when. Again, repeating, UConn suspends all basketball activities. Stocks are rallying globally. We've got an update on Wall Street. We are now well off session highs, 13 minutes to go ahead of the close. Investors rush back into technology and healthcare firms on bets the U.S. election results will mean no major tax increases or regulatory changes that could derail those sectors. Stay with Bloomberg for the latest, in fact, special coverage today as we continue to keep an eye on election results. Right now, the S&P is up 62, higher by 1.8%. The Dow's up 485, up 1.7%. NASDAQ up 265. That's a gain of 2.3%. 10 years down 2/32, 10-year yield 0.76%. Gold, spot gold up 2.5%, $19.50 the ounce right now. West Texas Intermediate crude down 1.8%, $38.45 a barrel. Among the companies reporting earnings after the close of trading today will be Uber. Uber shares up now by 2.1%. We'll also be hearing from News Corp, Electronic Arts, Roku, Yelp, and Zillow. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie Pellet getting us up to speed. Want to get back to our guest, still with Kevin Cirilli, June Grosso, and me, is Jonathan Bernstein. He's Bloomberg opinion columnist, and he's got a column on the Bloomberg as we speak. He's joining us on the phone from San Antonio, Texas. Hey, Jonathan, I want to pick up on something Kevin mentioned, and we were talking about just the inability of really even the Republican Party to kind of all be on the same page. And I wonder, and we've got a story coming up a little bit later on. It's the cover of the magazine about Trumpism and just Donald Trump's impact on politics in the Republican Party. No matter what happens in terms of the White House, it's here to stay. But I do wonder about the inability of maybe all Republicans to kind of feel the same way about the direction of the party impacts that popular vote.
Well, you know, what I would say is hurting the party more than anything else is that the presidents that they've had have had a real difficult time staying popular because they've had a real difficult time governing. You know, if you look at Donald Trump, he's been below water for 4 years in his approval ratings. The last Republican president before that, George W. Bush, was briefly very, very popular after the September 11th attacks, but then spent the last 4 to 5 years of his administration, of his 2 terms, underwater. He was able to win re-election with the majority of the popular vote, only one who's done it, but he still was unpopular. So, you know, Republican presidents have been unpopular their last 9 years in office. If you add in the last year of the first George Bush, they've been unpopular for...
I don't know. I got to interrupt, though, because he's got 93% approval rating with Republicans, Jonathan. I mean, the president held together the Republican Party. So I hear you on the sense. I mean, look, it's still, he has a very real chance of losing re-election, but Republicans picked up 7 seats in the House. Mitch McConnell, we were all talking, is Amy McGrath going to upset Mitch McConnell? On track to potentially be the leader of the Senate again. Lindsey Graham won re-election. Joni Ernst won re-election.
That's despite Trump.
But I gotta tell you, this is such and I gotta really be candid here. When I talk to Republicans, this conversation that we're having is totally divorced from, I'm gonna say, reality, because there are so many Republicans that I talk with who say, even if President Trump doesn't win re-election, that the way he's changed this party on trade policy, on manufacturing, on foreign policy, he is the new Republican establishment, whether people like it or not. And that's just the fact.
That may be true. That's separate from the question of, is he popular among the population at large? And the truth is he isn't. And, you know, he wasn't in 2016, managed to fluke out of electoral college vote win anyway. He isn't in 2020. He's going to wind up losing by a larger majority in the popular vote. And, you know, he is really popular among the Republican Party. They had huge turnout this time. That's to his credit. But, you know, at least that shows that he's very popular within his party. But beyond sort of that group, you know, yes, he's very popular with his strong supporters. Beyond that, not so much.
Jonathan, what's your take on, let's say Trump loses the election? will he go away? Will he leave the political scene, or will he continue to dominate the Republican Party?
You know, that you have to get inside somebody's head, so I don't know that any of us can answer that. I do think that it's absolutely true. He has very, very strong supporters, so if he wants to, he very well could, you know, be the dominant voice in the Republican Party for the next 4 years, assuming he loses. And he very well could run for the presidency again and perhaps even get the nomination. That is very hard to tell because it mostly depends on what he himself decides to do. Is that what he wants to do with his life at, you know, his current age and his current situation, or not? And it's very hard to tell. If it's not him, there'll be somebody who, you know, there'll be a series of people, some of whom will sound more or less like him, but I don't think anybody's going to sound exactly like Donald Trump.
But it's interesting.
And I think
Go ahead, Kev.
I think it's really interesting in the sense, and I know people who are listening are going to, you know, don't swerve off the road. But I think what the Republican Party is going to have to decide, and I don't want to get too far into hypotheticals while people are still counting votes, but regardless of any time a presidential nominee loses the election, will the same thing happen to Donald Trump? What happened to Hillary Clinton, which was there was a freezing out of Hillary Clinton. And I think it's going to be more difficult for Republicans to really do this, especially when you look at a key battleground state like Florida that Trump won, Ohio, which he won. And look, I mean, there is an argument to be made that, again, he was able to defeat the Bush contingency of the Republican Party in the primary. And so he's in there to stay. I don't see him going away. Based upon my reporting for the past several years, I do not see it, folks.
He is getting old, though, Kevin. I mean, he'll be
his sons
78
aren't. His sons aren't. His daughter isn't.
That's a different story now. That's a different story.
That's a good question. I mean, Jonathan, do you see kind of a Trump political legacy here, or you know? Go ahead.
What I think one of the key variables is, and it's something we don't know, is what will conservative Republican-aligned media do if Trump, you know, assuming Trump loses, which is what it looks like is going to happen. Will they decide to give him and his family and his strongest, you know, his former White House aides and all that, their platform, or are they going to move on? And I think that has to do with some individuals and what they think, and it has to do with some profit questions with various media outlets. And I think, that's who the key variable is. Not so much the politicians, not so much rank and file Republicans, but the people who make Republican-aligned media. What are they going to think? Because he's been a moneymaker for them. They may stick with him, but they may also decide to move on. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, it is.
And it's going to be interesting to see what the progressive media does as well, especially, you know, when you've got, should Biden ultimately win? I mean, how do they cover AOC? How do they cover the far left and the Democratic Socialist movement? I don't think we know that, Carol.
No, I don't think we know that either, right? And time will certainly tell on that. I also do think it's interesting and kind of provocative. I know reading in this morning, Kevin, I don't know if you saw it, June or Jonathan, you know, this whole idea that if indeed President Trump doesn't get a second term now, does he come back in 4 years,
yes.
right?
Yes.
Which is a possibility. I mean, we are definitely living in interesting times, and I do wonder about what is the soul of the Republican Party, because I agree with you, Kevin, that, I mean, there's been nobody like, it feels like, Donald Trump, who has really kind of riled up the base.
Yeah, and I mean, 93%. I just keep going back to 93% approval rating amongst Republicans.
But what about all the Republicans he's lost, though, Kevin? Think about the Lincoln Project and all these dyed-in-the-wool Republicans who have turned against the party because of him.
But it's interesting to look at the turnout and just see how many have been riled up and how many have come who hadn't maybe voted for years that showed up. I'm sorry, Kevin.
Yeah, and I'll just say, I think that we talked a lot about the Republicans, but there's no question Democrats are going to have some party reconciliation to do as well.
All right, got to leave it there. Jonathan, thank you so much. Bloomberg opinion columnist Jonathan Bernstein. Check out his latest column. You can find it on the Bloomberg terminal. Of course, always at Bloomberg.com. Joining us on the phone from San Antonio, Texas. Stick around, folks. We've got the closing bell in just a moment. It's just about 3.5 minutes away. This is Bloomberg Radio.
and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. There you have it, sound of the closing bell at the New York Stock Exchange. Stocks extend the biggest rally since April. Folks from the Whitestone REIT virtually ringing that closing bell as we await the latest numbers out of Uber, News Corp, Sarepta Therapeutics, Dropbox, Electronic Arts, Roku, Yelp, and Zillow. Stocks rallied globally as investors rush back into technology and healthcare names on bets that the U.S. election results will mean no major tax increases or regulatory changes that would derail the sectors. The dollar weakened to the lowest in more than 2 years. S&P jumping more than 1% for the fourth straight day and is headed for the best week since April. So here's where we ended. S&P up 66 points today, up 1.9%. We finished off session highs. The Dow rallied 542 points, up 2%. NASDAQ up 300, a gain of 2.6%. The 10-year down 230 seconds, 10-year yield 0.77%. Gold up 2.5%, 19.50 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude down 1.6%, 38.51 a barrel. Fed Chair Jay Powell is stressing that the economy needs more fiscal and monetary policy support. He's also warning that mounting coronavirus infection rates are also a risk.
Since the beginning of the pandemic, we have taken forceful actions to provide relief and stability, to ensure that the recovery will be as strong as possible, and to limit lasting damage to the economy.